All right. We're back, and today we're predicting a new division. We're continuing our series predicting every single team's record in the NFL in 2020. We finished the AFC West and the complete NFC, and today we are predicting the AFC South, and we're going to begin with the Houston Texans. So make sure you guys keep up the support on all these videos. We really appreciate it, and you know how these videos works by now. So before we get in predicting game by game the team's record, let's talk about what the Texans did in the offseason. So, this is where you insert some memes right here. Come on, Bill O'Brien. Nobody knows why Bill O'Brien did that trade. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins left Houston, and basically he traded DeAndre Hopkins for nothing. Now, Texans fans, calm down. You got David Johnson, who, honestly, David Johnson was pretty strong back in the Cardinals Super Bowl run days. But come on now. David Johnson's washed, injury-prone, definitely not going to escalate this team's offense that much. He joins Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson, honestly, might be better than David Johnson. Probably will be. He was actually pretty solid, but then he got injured. So, basically, DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, horrible trade. Definitely downgrades this team, and they're definitely not going to improve because of the loss of DeAndre Hopkins. On the other hand, what the Texans did to kind of recover from that loss in the receiver position, they brought in a couple other players at wide receiver. So joining Will Fuller and Kenny Stills, they were bringing in Randall Cobb from the Dallas Cowboys, and they traded for Brandon Cooks from the Los Angeles Rams. So like they're trying to accommodate for losing DeAndre Hopkins, but Randall Cobb, last time I checked, not DeAndre Hopkins. Brandon Cooks, definitely a good number 2 or number 3 receiver, but not DeAndre Hopkins. Brandon Cooks is not going to, I don't think he's going to take over this role very well as the number 1 receiver. Honestly, I think he had an off year in Los Angeles. Probably the reason that they traded him for a second-round pick only. So, the Texans' wide receiver core, not looking good. Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Randall Cobb is how they have it listed on the depth chart. And then Kenny Stills is a speed threat, I guess. To go along with that decent receiver core, kind of bad. The Texans' offensive line is horrible. They did acquire Laremy Tunsil. That was last year, though. Laremy Tunsil definitely is the centerpiece of this offensive line, but they didn't do enough around Laremy Tunsil. Their other offensive linemen, I think the other 4 offensive linemen, they're horrible. Couldn't tell you anything about any of them. They're not that good. They did re-signed Darren Fells. Fells had a career-high year in 2019. Still wasn't great, but him and Watson seem to have some red zone chemistry, so that's a good tight end right there. Deshaun Watson, honestly, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league because everybody knows his talents and they're aware of it. But imagine what Deshaun Watson could do if he wasn't running for his life, getting sacked every single play. If Deshaun Watson had an offensive line, then he might be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and I strongly believe that. But offensive line is horrible, so I think that this offense might struggle a lot more than it did in 2019. The defense, they get J.J. Watt back from injury. They have Whitney Merciless and Justin Reed, Bradley Roby, and Vernon Hargreaves are the most notable people. Let's look. I don't think that besides J.J. Watt, their defensive linemen aren't that great. But they do run a 3-4 defense, and their linebackers are kind of, besides Whitney Merciless, they're pretty weak as well. So Texans' defense isn't anything to, get excited about. Texans did go 10-6 in 2019, and they won the division by 1 game to the Tennessee Titans, and the Colts were 7-9. So it was a close division, but Texans were 10-6. All right, this year the Texans start things off with a tough game against the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs. This game is in Kansas City. Come on now, let's be real. Kansas City Chiefs going to start off strong again. The Texans defense isn't going to be strong enough to stop Pat Mahomes. Texans offense isn't going to be great either in this game. Texans definitely start off 0-1. Next up, they play the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens should have faced the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC playoffs last year, but they didn't. I do think that the Ravens definitely are a similar team to the Chiefs in terms of talent. They just kind of downplayed, I guess, in the playoffs. I think that regardless if this game is in Houston, the Ravens are a better team offensively and defensively. Ravens should get the win here. Texans start off slow 0-2. Week 3, Texans travel to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not a huge fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers just because Ben Roethlisberger, kind of a big question mark surrounding his elbow and arm. But I do think that the Steelers' defense is strong enough to stop this offense of the Texans. The Steelers' defensive line is honestly so strong. They got T.J. Watt headlining it. They'll probably have their whole entire defensive scheme ready to stop the Texans. Steelers have an elite defense. Their offense is definitely decent enough to score some points in this game. Steelers get the win here in Pittsburgh, and the Texans start off 0-3. Week 4, Texans play the Minnesota Vikings. This game's in Houston. And you hate to see it, but the Houston Texans are going to be starting 0-4. They play 4 teams that just are better teams overall, offensively and defensively. The Texans' defense might be a little bit better than the Vikings' defense. So I think the Texans and Vikings defense are comparable. But I do think that the Vikings offense is a lot better. I like Devin Bush at running back a lot more than David Johnson. And the Vikings actually have a decent offensive line protecting their quarterback. So I think the Vikings get the win here. Texans 0-4, slow start. Next up, the Texans play a divisional rival of the Jacksonville Jaguars, team that's going to be tanking in 2020 for sure. Easy win. I'm going to just let you guys know right now. Texans will sweep the Jaguars in 2020, no doubt about it. And the Texans are 1-4. Texans then play another tough team, divisional matchup. They play the Tennessee Titans for the first time, and this game is in Tennessee. I think the Titans have a better team, roster-wise, offense and defense. We got A.J. Brown, who's really going to develop into a good player, I think. He complements Corey Davis well. Derrick Henry carries the offense, and they have a decent offensive line in Tennessee. On defense, they got Kevin Byard to headline things. I don't know why they got rid of Jarrell Casey. That's a little question mark right there for the Titans' defensive front. But I think the Titans definitely are a good enough team right here to get the win. Texans fall, and they become 1-5. Next up, they play the Green Bay Packers. This game is in Houston. Now, of all the good teams that they've lost to, which is the first five good teams they've played, I think this will be the closest game. I think if there's an upset potential for the Texans to beat any of those good teams, I think it comes here to the Packers in Houston. But I can't bet on the Houston Texans offense. I think with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, anything is possible. But it's just going to be hard with less pieces than he had in 2019. Texans start off 1-6. Bad start. Next up, they play the Jacksonville Jaguars again. Like I said, they're going to sweep the Jacksonville Jaguars, so make that 2-6. Then they play the Cleveland Browns. This game is in Cleveland. I think that the Cleveland Browns, I don't really have any thoughts on them. I think, they're not great. They're not horrible. But the Texans, I think, will get the win here. I hope the Texans get things rolling right here, and they go 3-6. Next up, they play the New England Patriots. This game is in Houston. I think the Patriots aren't going to be great, but I think they do have a big chance of being better than people think right now. Because, if Bill Belichick sees that Jarrett Stidham isn't the guy, I think Bill Belichick goes out, maybe gets Cam Newton or somebody else to replace him. And with Stephon Gilmore in defense, like Brandon Cooks isn't going to be a factor in this game. And you know what that means? That means that Deshaun Watson is going to be scrambling from all the defensive threat pressure while throwing to Will Fuller and Randall Cobb. I think that the Texans lose this game right here to New England, and they're 3-7. Next up, they play the Detroit Lions. This game's in Detroit. We all know how high I am on the Detroit Lions. I think that if their coach, if Matt Patricia wasn't such a not great coach, I think they'd be a lot further. I do think they're going to be the Cinderella story team in 2020, similar to how the Titans were in 2019. I think Matthew Stafford and Kenny Golladay in the offense definitely will beat the Houston Texans here. The Lions defense, they did lose Darius Slay, but they brought in Jeff Okudah and Desmond Trufant to kind of replace him. I think that's a good replacement, whereas the Texans didn't really replace DeAndre Hopkins quite as well, and I think the Texans will feel that here. Texans start off 3-8. Yikes. So now we're late in the season, and they're 3-8, and they're kind of struggling, but for some reason, they have a win streak going once we get to these games. So they play the Indianapolis Colts. This game is in Houston. It's the first of their matchups. I think they'll split with the Colts. They're both similar teams. I think the Colts are better overall, but I just don't know how much Phillip Rivers is going to function as a good quarterback or not in Indianapolis. So I'm going to give the Texans the first win in this matchup at home, and they're 4-8. Next up, they play the Bears. This game is in Chicago. I think Nick Foles will be the quarterback at this point. You know how much I like Nick Foles. I'm an Eagles fan. But I think Nick Foles is going to be the Bears' schedule gets tough later in the season. They have some tougher opponents. I think coming off of a couple of those tough games, I think Nick Foles will drop one right here to the Houston Texans, and they'll fall. So the Texans get the win, 5-8. Next up, they play the Colts again. Like I said, I have the Texans splitting with the Colts. I think it's a pretty fair assessment of things. So Texans 5-9. And then they finish off their schedule with 2 games. The first one is against the Bengals. This game's in Houston. I think the Bengals definitely could win this game. No one really knows how the Bengals offense is going to be functioning in 2020. Definitely going to be better, but their offensive line still needs to improve to have any running game or to protect Joe Burrow from injury. And what if Joe Burrow gets injured? Jeez. But the Texans get the win here. Bengals defense not great at all. Next up, final game of the season, they play the Tennessee Titans. This game definitely going to be an upset. It's in Houston, and I think that the Texans will get the win here. Not sure why. I'm just feeling like the Titans might not need this win. I think they'll already be in a good spot in the division, and I think the Texans going to, it's a home game. I think the Texans get the win right here. I think it'll be a really close game. I think the Texans will be happy that they, close the season off with a win after a disappointing record. So Texans 7-9. And before you guys, wow, 7-9. So with the 7 teams making the playoffs now, my 7 seed prediction, I can just say because I already finished. So I finished the AFC West predictions, and I predicted the Denver Broncos to be 9-7. And with a 9-7 record, the Denver Broncos would make the playoffs as a 7 seed. And no other teams are going to be 9-7, and no other teams are going to be 8-8. So a record of 7-9 is just one game away from making the playoffs if the Broncos were 8-8, and so were the Texans. So then I would be a tiebreaker and all that. But Texans 7-9, that's the record prediction. Definitely not going to be as good as they were in 2019 when they went 10-6. But there it is. Thanks for watching. Next up, Indianapolis Colts, new look team, same division. Phillip Rivers. We'll talk about that next video.